Liora stood by the door, her feet feeling like lead. The orange glow of the fire began crawling across the floor, reaching for her, bringing a stinging heat back to her numb fingers. "Sit down," Kavi commanded, his sharp tone leaving no room for argument. He pointed to an old, sagging sofa near the fire. Liora wanted to fight back, just to prove she could, but her shaking legs betrayed her. She sank into the cushions and hugged her knees to her chest. Kavi didn't stop moving. He shook out a few old blankets and checked the window latches, making sure the storm stayed outside. He was efficient, controlled the Kavi she knew. But there was something else in his movements. He was being careful with her. There was no audience here, no cameras, no family members to impress with a show of a happy marriage. He was doing this because he wanted to. "Who are you right now?" Liora wondered silently. She'd spent so long watching him play the part of a husband that she forgot he might actually be one. Kavi knelt on the floor in front of her. He draped a heavy wool blanket over her shoulders, tucking the edges around her as if she were a child. His fingers brushed her cheek and lingered for a second too long. He was checking her temperature, but the touch felt like a bolt of energy. His jaw tightened when he felt how cold she still was. "You need to change your attire," Kavi said, his eyes dropping to her soaked sweater before snapping back to the fire. "Damp fabric will keep you freezing. You won't get warm like that." Liora stiffened. She looked around the small, open room. There was no bathroom, no divider, no privacy. The idea of him nearby while she changed made her heart hammer against her ribs. "I'll be fine," she said, pulling the blanket up to her chin. "Stop fussing over me." Kavi's lips tilted into a small, dark smile. "You always hated it when I fussed. But I can't stop, Liora. Not when it's you." The words hit her like a physical weight. Kavi stood up and turned his back to her, walking toward the window to give her some version of privacy. Liora watched the tension in his shoulders, his hands curled into fists at his sides. He looked like a man trying very hard not to turn around. Liora moved fast. She stepped out of the heavy, wet layers and cast them into a pile. She stood there in the flickering firelight, shivering and pale. She wrapped the blanket tight around her frame and sat back on the sofa. "You can look now," she murmured. Kavi turned around. His eyes swept over her, checking to see if she was covered. He nodded once and sat on the opposite end of the long sofa. He didn't try to touch her again. He just watched the flames. The fire crackled, popping as the wood settled. Liora felt her body warming up, but her mind was spinning. She should feel safe, relieved to be out of the snow. Instead, she felt like she was in a different kind of danger. Kavi sat there like a hunter trying to pretend he was a protector, stealing glances at her. "Do you think the roads will be clear by morning?" Liora asked. Kavi leaned back, the firelight carving deep shadows into his face. "Maybe. Or maybe the storm wants us to stay right here." Liora pulled the blanket tighter. "Why would you say that?" "Because out there, the world tells us who to be," Kavi said, his gaze locking with hers, full of an intensity that made her breath hitch. "In here, it's just us. No lies, no scripts." Liora looked at the fire. She couldn't shake the feeling that Kavi wasn't upset about being stranded. He looked like a man who finally had exactly what he wanted. "Is that what this is to you?" Liora asked. "A chance to play house without an audience?" Kavi leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "Is that really what you think I'm doing?" "You've been staring for a while," Liora said, her voice sharp, cutting through the heavy silence of the room. "If you have something to say, just say it." Kavi didn't move. He couldn't. He sat across from her, watching the way the lamplight caught the damp strands of her hair. She was a mess. Her usual perfection was gone, replaced by frizzled curls and a face that still shimmered from the rain. She looked small, wrapped in a thick blanket that she pulled tight around her shoulders, but her eyes were narrowed in a glare that could melt steel. She wasn't looking at him. She was glaring at the wall, at the floor, at anything but him. Kavi knew she was fuming. She was focused entirely on the man sitting 3 feet away, and Kavi didn't mind being the target of her anger one bit. "I'm waiting, Kavi," she snapped, her chest rising and falling in a rapid, jagged rhythm. The movement of the blanket caught his eye. Every breath she took seemed to pulse through the room. Kavi felt his own pulse thrumming in his neck. He had promised her boundaries. He had told himself he would stay on his side of the line. But watching her shiver, seeing the way her hand twitched against her lap, he felt those promises dissolving like salt in the rain. What will happen next in this tiny cabin? What does Kavi really want to say? Don't miss out on the next chapter. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below with your predictions. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
He could hear her heart. It was fast, way too fast for someone who was just annoyed. She felt the weight of his gaze. She knew exactly what he was looking at. "I have plenty to say," Kavi muttered, his voice sounding deeper than usual. "But I don't think you want to hear any of it." Liora finally turned her head. She blinked, her expression shifting from anger to a flicker of confusion. She looked so innocent in that moment, acting as if she didn't know the effect she had on him. It was the final straw. The restraint Kavi had been clinging to didn't just slip, it snapped. 1 second, he was sitting in the armchair. The next, he was over her. He moved with a speed that made her gasp, caging her against the back of the sofa. He planted his hands on either side of her head, leaning down until his shadow completely swallowed her. Liora's breath hitched. The sound was soft, but to Kavi, it sounded like a challenge. "I can't hold it back anymore," Kavi growled, his face inches from hers. "You think I can just sit across the room and pretend you aren't wrecking me? You think I'm that strong?" Liora's lips parted, her eyes widening as she pressed her back into the cushions. She looked like she wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Kavi leaned closer, his breath fanning across her cheek. The scent of rain and her skin filled his senses, making his head spin. "You want an answer?" Kavi's voice dropped to a guttural rasp. "About that night. About Yala. About all the lies." Liora swallowed hard. He watched the movement of her throat, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts he shouldn't be having. "Kavi," she breathed. "Don't," he warned, his voice a low rumble in his chest. "Don't say my name like that unless you're ready for what happens next." She was trembling now. It wasn't because of the cold anymore. Kavi could feel the heat radiating off her body, matching the fire in his own veins. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to find a shred of his old composure, but it was gone. "Every time I was with her, I was thinking of you," he admitted, the words coming out through gritted teeth. It was a confession that felt like a wound. "I closed my eyes and pictured your face. I imagined it was your voice I was hearing. Your body I was holding." Liora stiffened. Her eyes flashed, not just with anger, but with a dark, shimmering heat that mirrored his own. She looked like she wanted to hit him and pull him closer at the same time. "You don't get to be angry," Kavi hissed, his grip tightening on the sofa frame. "Not when you're the one who started this. You're the one who walked into my life and tore everything down." He reached out, his fingers catching her chin. He didn't hurt her, but he forced her to look him in the eye. He wanted her to see the hunger there. He wanted her to know exactly how much power she had over him. "I wanted boundaries, Liora. I really did," he whispered, his tone turning dark and heavy. "But to hell with them. To hell with all the rules. I want you. I've always wanted you." Liora stared up at him, her mask of calm finally shattering. She looked at his mouth, then back to his eyes. A bitter, challenging smile touched her lips. "You mean you want to sleep with me?" she said. Her voice was flat, blunt, and uncharacteristically bold. "That's all this is." Kavi felt a slow, dangerous grin spread across his face. He liked this version of her, the one that stopped playing nice. "You think it's that simple?" Kavi leaned in until their noses brushed. "I don't just want a night with you, Liora. I want to ruin you for anyone else. I want to be the only thing you think about when you wake up and the only name you scream when you close your eyes." He watched her pupils dilate as he spoke, his voice dropping to a whisper that vibrated between them. "I want to stay with you until you can't remember what it's like to be without me. I want to push you until you beg me to stop, and then I want to stay right there until you realize you never want me to leave." Liora's breath was coming in short, shallow bursts. She was trapped between him and the sofa, with nowhere to run and, for the first time, no desire to escape. "So tell me, Liora," Kavi whispered against her lips. Are you going to tell me to get out? Where is she, Tal? Sela gripped the car door so hard the interior panel let out a sickening crack. The storm outside the Elon estate was a wall of white and gray, matching the cold dread pooling in his stomach. He shouldn't have left her. He knew at the moment his lungs had opened up and the suffocating itch of the allergic reaction faded. But in the woods, under the pressure of the pack's legacy, he had chosen the image of the Alpha over the safety of the woman. Alpha, we need to get you to the doctor, the driver whispered, his eyes wide in the rearview mirror. Just drive. Sela snapped. His voice was a jagged hiss that filled the cramped space of the luxury sedan. He stared out the window as the forest began to shrink into the distance. His mind was a mess of memories he had tried for years to bury. He could still feel Leora's small hands on his chest from earlier that day, guiding his breathing while he gasped for air. She had looked at him with such raw, unshielded worry. It was a look no one else gave him. To the pack, he was a stone wall. To Ziva, he was a prize. But to Liora, he was just a man who couldn't breathe. Then he saw it in his mind again, the moment he reached the trailhead and saw Kavi. Kavi stood there like a shadow against the snow, his black coat snapping in the wind. He had Tal by the collar, his face a mask of pure, righteous fury. Sela had felt that familiar, bitter sting in his chest. It was their childhood on a loop. Sela followed the rules and protected the title, while Kavi did the things that actually mattered. Kavi had sensed him immediately. The true-born Alpha always had that edge. Their eyes had met for a fraction of a second, and in that look, Sela saw his own failure. Kavi didn't wait for permission. He didn't care about his image or the logical choice. He simply turned and sprinted into the freezing darkness to find Liora. Sela leaned his head against the cold glass of the window. I should have gone back, he muttered to the empty air. He had spent 3 years married to Liora. For the first few months, there had been a warmth in the house that he hadn't known how to handle. She was everything a Luna should be, nurturing, kind, and soft enough to balance his hard edges. But then he met Ziva. Ziva was fire and ambition. She felt like the mate the world expected a top-tier alpha to have. But now, sitting in the silence of his car, the fire felt like it was burning him alive. How does he always do this? Sela gripped his knees. How does he always make me look like the villain? He knew what Kavi wanted. It wasn't just the pack. Kavi wanted everything that belonged to Sela. The title, the respect, and now, the woman Sela had foolishly let walk away. The marriage contract had been moved from Kavi to Sela 6 years ago, a move that secured Sela's spot as the head of the Elon pack. It was a business deal, a legacy move. But seeing Liora lean into Kavi's strength would be a debt Sela could never repay. His phone buzzed on the leather seat next to him. The screen lit up with Ziva's name. Sela stared at the flashing light. Usually, her calls were a command he felt forced to obey. The mate bond would pulse, a dull ache in his chest that told him where he belonged. Today, the pulse felt like a shackle. He picked up the phone and threw it across the seat. It hit the opposite door with a dull thud. I'm done letting fate tell me who to love, Sela growled. He thought of Leora's eyes again, those gentle, naive eyes that didn't understand the monsters hiding behind alpha masks. She was too good for the games he and Kavi played. She deserved to be held, to be protected, to be seen. The driver cleared his throat nervously. Sir, the council is expecting a report on the border patrol. And Ziva, she's already at the house waiting for you. Sela didn't look at him. He watched the snowy trees blur into a single, dark line. Let her wait. She's good at that. He felt a deep sense of loss, a hollow cavern opening up where his pride used to be. He had spent so long trying to prove he was a better alpha than Kavi. He had worked twice as hard, followed every tradition, and kept his weaknesses hidden from the world. But Kavi was currently in a blizzard, risking his life for the woman Sela had abandoned. The image of Kavi's arms around Liora, warming her, bringing her back to life, made Sela want to roar. It was a crushing defeat. He hadn't even stayed to fight. He had run to a car because he was afraid of a few berries and a damaged reputation. "Turn the car around," Sela said suddenly. The driver blinked. "Sir? The storm is getting worse. The roads are closing." "I said turn the car around." Sela leaned forward, his eyes flashing with a sudden, desperate gold light. "I'm not leaving her out there with him." The car swerved as the driver hit the brakes, the tires hissing against the slush. Sela felt the weight of his grandfather's legacy pressing down on him, but for the first time, he didn't care about the Elon name. He cared about the way Liora smelled like vanilla and rain. He cared about the way she looked at him before the world got in the way. As the car began a slow, heavy U-turn on the narrow highway, Sela gripped the seat. He was the top alpha. He was the one who was supposed to win. But as he looked back toward the dark forest, he realized he was already miles behind. "Liora, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Just wait for me." The driver accelerated, heading back toward the danger they had just escaped. Sela watched the GPS, the little blue dot moving toward the heart of the storm. He knew Ziva would be furious. He knew the council would question his sanity. But the thought of Kavi claiming Liora's heart was a fire he couldn't put out with logic. He reached over and picked up his phone. Ziva had left 3 missed calls in the last 2 minutes. He swiped the notifications away and turned the device off completely. The car hit a deep snowdrift, jolting Sela forward. He didn't flinch. He just watched the trees. Somewhere in that white hell, his wife was freezing, and his rival was playing the hero. Sela had spent his whole life being the right choice on paper. Now, he had to prove he was the right choice in the real world. "Faster," Sela commanded. "I'm trying, Alpha." "The visibility is 0. Sela stared into the white void ahead. "Then drive by instinct. Because if he gets to her first, there's nothing left for us to go back to." "Did you take care of it?" The question hit Carmel before he even sat down. His grandfather, the old Alpha, sat in the dimly lit study like a judge. He leaned heavily on his cane, but his eyes were sharp. They moved from Carmel's face down to the red, angry hives on his neck. Carmel felt the itch burning under his skin. He didn't scratch. To his grandfather, an allergy was just another word for a weakness. A real Alpha didn't have weaknesses. "Nobody saw," Carmel said. He kept his voice steady and sat in the chair across from the desk. "Liora stayed with me the whole time. She kept the crowds away until the storm cleared." He shouldn't have mentioned her name. It felt like a confession. But saying it out loud gave him a strange sense of victory. Even after 3 years, Liora was the only one who looked at him with kindness. She made the world feel lighter. His grandfather narrowed his eyes. "And where is she now?" Carmel's fists clenched on his lap. "With Kavi." The old man nodded slowly. "Good. Kavi will take care of his wife." "As he should." He leaned forward, his gaze turning cold. "And you should be more attentive to yours. Ziva is becoming a problem." The mention of Ziva made Carmel's jaw tighten. He knew Ziva had been messing with the family businesses at the hottest mall. She was desperate and messy. 3 years ago, he thought he wanted her. Now, he just wanted her gone. "The title of Luna should be returned to Liora," Carmel said. The silence in the room grew heavy. His grandfather arched an eyebrow, looking genuinely surprised. "Everything should return to its rightful place," Carmel continued. He didn't care if it sounded like a threat. "I'm fixing the mistake we made." The old man leaned back in his leather chair. A small, mocking smile played on his lips. "Are you saying you want to give up your title? Are you handing the Alpha position to Kavi so he can step aside?" "No," Carmel snapped. "I'm keeping my title. But I'm taking Liora back. She was mine first." His grandfather actually chuckled. It was a dry, raspy sound. "And you think Kavi will just sit there? You think he'll watch you walk away with his wife?" Kavi used to be the family outcast. The boy they banished. But ever since he returned with the power of Macelink behind him, the old man treated him like a golden son. It turned Carmel's stomach. "I'm not asking for permission," Carmel said, standing up. "I'm just telling you what's going to happen. Don't interfere with my business this time." He didn't wait for a response. He turned on his heel and walked out of the study, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. He needed to get upstairs, wash the sweat and the hives off his skin, and figure out his next move. He was halfway to the stairs when a small, dark blur came charging down the hallway. It was Joel, Liora's son. The boy was running too fast, his little legs pumping as he giggled. He wasn't looking where he was going. Carmel saw the trip coming a mile away. The boy's foot caught the edge of the rug, and he began to tip forward. "Joel," a voice called out from behind. It was Mora, the nanny. Carmel froze for a split second. Then, he moved. He dropped to one knee and reached out, catching the small bundle of energy before the boy's face hit the floor. Joel let out a startled yelp. "Owie!" The boy's eyes were wide and swimming with tears. He looked up at Carmel, trembling in his arms. Carmel looked down at the child, the son Liora shared with another man, and felt a sharp, painful tug in his chest. "You're okay," Carmel muttered, his voice sounding foreign to his own ears. "Stop crying. You run fast, Joel." "Show me how fast you are," Carmel says, his voice softer than he usually allows. Joel giggles and kicks his legs. The boy is a blur of energy in Carmel's arms. He struggles to get down, his tiny hands pushing against Carmel's chest with surprising strength. Carmel almost laughs, but he catches the smile before it fully forms. There is a strange pull in his chest whenever he holds this child. It is a connection he cannot explain and one he definitely should not feel. "I'm sorry, Alpha," Mora says as she hurries over. She looks worried as she reaches for the boy. "He is very spirited today." Carmel hands him over. As he does, his hand lingers. He brushes his fingers over Joel's messy hair, ruffling it the way he saw Liora do earlier. The boy beams at him. When Joel smiles, deep dimples carve into his cheeks. His eyes sparkle with an innocent kind of light that makes Carmel's heart ache. He shouldn't feel this. This is Kavi's son. The thought is a bitter pill to swallow. "I run fast," Joel shouts. He puffs out his chest like a tiny soldier. He takes 2 steps and then stops. A sharp, wet sneeze echoes through the hall. Mora immediately drops to her knees. She pulls a cloth from her pocket and wipes his nose. "We need to get you into warm clothes, little one. We cannot have you catching a cold." She grabs Joel's hands and starts rubbing his palms. "And no more touching the bushes outside. I told you before. Those berries make your skin turn red and itchy." Carmel is halfway down the hall, but he freezes. The air in the room suddenly feels like ice. He turns back slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Did you say berries make him itchy?" Carmel asks. Mora looks up, surprised by the edge in his voice. "Yes, Alpha. A very bad allergy." His skin breaks out in hives almost instantly. Carmel walks back toward them. He crouches down so he is eye level with the boy. His heart is thudding against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Joel," he says quietly. "Do you get itchy when you eat berries? Even the sweet ones?" Joel looks confused for a second. He taps his chin, thinking hard. Then he nods quickly. "Bad itchy," he repeats. He scratches his arm to show Carmel what happens. Then, his attention snaps to a toy car on the floor. He squeals and runs after it, his heavy footsteps fading down the corridor. Mora follows him, calling out for him to slow down. Carmel stays on the floor, rooted to the spot. His hands are shaking. In the entire Elon bloodline, there is only one person with that specific allergy. It wasn't his grandfather. It wasn't Kavi. It was only Carmel. He stands up too fast, his head spinning. He forces a fake smile as Mora looks back at him one last time, but inside, his world is cracking open. He walks toward his room, but his mind is racing through a timeline. He thinks about the divorce. He thinks about the last night he spent with Liora. The math starts to hum in his brain. Joel's age matches the day Liora left almost perfectly. It's impossible, he whispers to the empty room. Liora was with Kavi now. They were married. But the Liora he knew, the woman he loved, wouldn't have jumped into another man's bed that quickly. She just wasn't that kind of person. He goes to his room and turns on the shower, hoping the hot water will wash away the suspicion. It doesn't. The thought is like a thorn stuck under his skin. The more he moves, the deeper it digs. By evening, the house is quiet. The news says the storm is going to get worse. Kavi and Liora are trapped at the gala, stuck in some hotel together for the night. The thought of them in a room alone makes Carmel's jaw ache from clenching it so hard. He wants Kavi gone. He wants Kavi out of the picture entirely. He finds himself walking down the hallway. He stops in front of the door to the guest suite where Liora and Kavi are staying. He knows he shouldn't go in, but the scent of her perfume is leaking through the cracks in the door. It's a warm, sweet scent that haunts his dreams. He pushes the door open. The room is dim. The bed is made, but the pillows are slightly tossed. He moves toward the vanity. His eyes land on a small blue hairbrush. It belongs to Joel. Carmel reaches out. His fingers tremble as he plucks a single strand of golden brown hair from the bristles. He tucks it into his pocket just as the door behind him creaks. He spins around. Ziva is standing there. Her eyes are red and puffy, and her makeup is a mess. She looks like a wreck. "Why are you in here?" she asks, her voice cracking. "You didn't answer my calls. I've been looking for you everywhere." Carmel doesn't look at her. He tries to push past, but she grabs his arm. "They are lying about me, Cam. That thing with Hodis, it wasn't me. I would never risk our future for something so small. You have to believe me." She is crying now, the tears leaving dark streaks on her face. Normally, Carmel might have felt a spark of pity. Now, he feels nothing. Her drama feels like a tiny noise compared to the storm in his head. "Not now, Ziva," he says. He pulls his arm away with a sharp jerk. He doesn't wait for her to respond. He heads down the stairs and out into the cold night air. The wind rips at his jacket, but he doesn't feel the chill. He is fueled by a sudden, frantic need for the truth. He slides into his car and starts the engine. He pulls out his phone and hits a speed dial contact. "Carmel," a man's voice answers. "It's me," Carmel says, his voice tight and low. "I'm heading to the hospital. I need a DNA test done immediately. No records, no names. Just results." There is a long pause on the other end. "On who, Carmel? What is going on?" Carmel reaches into his pocket and feels the thin strand of hair. "Joel Elon," he says. "I need to know if he's mine." "Tell me you don't want me to touch you," Kavi whispered. The silence in the cabin was heavy. Outside, the roar of the storm had faded into a dull hum, leaving only the sound of their breathing. Kavi stayed crouched in front of Liora, his shadow looming over her in the firelight. He felt the weight of his own words pressing down on him. He had never been a man who felt fear. He was the one people feared. But as he looked into Leora's wide, startled eyes, he realized he had been lying to himself. The panic that had clawed at his chest when he realized she was trapped in the woods was real. It was a cold, chilling terror he hadn't felt since the night the rogues attacked. His hands tightened into fists. His palms were still raw from how hard he had gripped the steering wheel during the drive to find her. He had almost lost her. The thought made his blood run cold. Liora didn't move. Her pupils darkened, a subtle change that most would miss, but Kavi saw everything. He saw the flicker of desire she tried so hard to mask with anger. It drew a dark smirk to his lips. She was fighting herself, and they both knew it. Kavi. She breathed. The way she said his name sounded like a confession. It was soft and pained. He leaned in closer, his nose almost brushing her forehead. She smelled like the rain and the damp wool of the blanket wrapped around her. Beneath that, he caught the sweet, familiar scent of her skin. Kavi braced his hands on the sofa on either side of her head, trapping her. He felt a primal urge to close the distance, but he forced himself to stay still. He wouldn't take another step until she made a choice. Liora leaned back into the cushions, but she didn't push him away. Her fingers trembled against the fabric of the blanket. This silence felt more dangerous than any argument they had ever had. "Say it," Kavi rasped, his voice rough. "Tell me you hate me." Liora parted her lips, but no words came out. He could see her pulse racing in the hollow of her throat. She looked away and closed her eyes, as if she could make the moment disappear if she just stopped looking at him. "Say the words, Liora," Kavi insisted. He felt like he was losing his mind. "Turn me down. Tell me who you want to be with instead of me." A part of him hoped she would say it. Maybe then he could find his senses and walk away. But the rest of him was hooked on the tension between them, unable to let go. "You can't do this," she finally whispered. Her voice was thin and shaky. "Not after everything. Not after Yala. Not after what you did." Kavi flinched, his jaw tightening so hard it ached. "I know what I did," he said. "I'm not asking for you to forgive me. I'm not even pretending I deserve you." He shifted, his chest brushing against the edge of her blanket. "Being with me is probably the worst decision you'll ever make. But I still want you. More than I ever have. It's killing me, Liora." Leora's eyes snapped open. They were bright with a mix of defiance and pain. "Then let it kill you quietly," she snapped. "Don't drag me down with you." The words stung, sharper than a physical blow. Kavi didn't pull back. Instead, he moved closer until his forehead rested against hers. He could feel the heat radiating off her skin. "You're already down here with me," he murmured. Liora let out a small, broken whimper. The sound sent a jolt through Kavi's spine. He let his hand slide down, his fingers brushing the curve of her neck. Her skin was soft, and he could feel her heart thudding wildly under his touch. "Tell me to stop," Kavi challenged her, his breath heavy. "Tell me to leave, and I swear I will. But don't sit there and pretend you don't feel this too." He watched her brows twitch. Her nails dug into the blanket, the fabric bunching in her grip. He waited for the rejection, for the order to get out, or for her to scream at him to leave her alone. Liora didn't say a word. The fire crackled in the hearth, but it was nothing compared to the heat radiating from Kavi. When his lips crashed down on Leora's, her racing heart stuttered. It paused for a single, thundering second before it resumed at a pace that made her ribs ache. She felt like her pulse might actually jump out of her skin. The kiss started clumsy and desperate. There was no finesse, only heavy breaths and panting restraint. It was a clash of desires that neither of them knew how to control. But as the seconds ticked by, the chaos steadied. It fell into a rhythm. It became Kavi's rhythm. He dominated the space completely. He moved his hand from the wall to slip it around the back of her neck. His grip was firm and certain. He wasn't trying to hurt her, but he wanted her to feel the weight of his claim. He tasted like mint and a faint hint of sweetness. Liora found herself drawing closer, a sudden craving for him stirring deep in her chest. She needed him closer. Her hand moved on its own, clutching the fabric of his coat and pulling him against her. Kavi complied, though he kept enough of his weight up so he didn't crush her into the sofa. Liora felt like she was drowning, desperate for air, but she didn't want him to stop. Not for a second. Kavi pulled back just enough for her to gasp for breath. He didn't go far. He left a trail of wet, heavy kisses down the line of her neck. Leora's skin burned in the wake of his touch. The blanket beneath her felt itchy and restrictive. She wanted it gone. Yet, she held on tightly, knowing it was the only thing between her and the cold air of the cabin. Let go. Kavi's voice was muffled against her skin. The command was unmistakable. Leora's fingers uncurled. Kavi grabbed the edge of the blanket and tossed it carelessly across the room. It landed somewhere near the hearth. A small part of Liora hoped it didn't catch fire. She hadn't survived a literal storm just to end up in a cabin fire. The chill of the room hit her skin, making her shiver visibly. Kavi didn't let the cold last long. He used his own body heat to banish the frost. He moved lower, his stubble teasing her sensitive skin. Liora hissed as a sharp sting of pleasure shot through her. Kavi soothed the sensation with a kiss, his touch greedy and hot. Kavi, she whimpered. She wasn't sure if she was begging him to stop or begging him to never let go. He didn't answer. He never talked much when he was like this. Instead, he shifted his weight, his hand cupping her side roughly. His thumb moved in slow, taunting circles against her skin. Leora's hips twitched against his thigh in an eager squirm. She knew she shouldn't be reacting this way. She shouldn't be giving in to him so easily. But her body refused to listen to her logic. Kavi finally lifted his head. His eyes were hooded and dark, his signature smirk firmly in place. He studied her like she was something he already owned. He looked at her as if she had never belonged anywhere else but right here. You know, I never planned on giving you back, he said. His voice was rough and thick with possession. Not your body. Not your heart. Not a single piece of you. He grinned, and for a moment, he looked almost dangerous. His eyes held a dark promise. I was going to remove anyone in my way before I let you go back, he added. Because you were always meant to be mine. Liora felt her throat tighten. These weren't sweet words. They were a claim. The worst part was that a part of her wanted to believe him. His hand slid lower, moving over her torso. Her muscles clenched in anticipation. Kavi, she managed to say. She caught his wrist, her nails digging into his skin. Don't. He went still. He wasn't hesitating, he was testing her. His gaze flicked down to her hand, then back up to her eyes. Slowly and deliberately, he moved his hand further down anyway. He put the weight of his choice against her resistance. Liora knew she should pull away. She should shove him off and end this. Instead, her grip faltered. Her fingers loosened, then slipped away entirely. Kavi exhaled a sharp breath, looking like a man who had just won a battle only he knew they were fighting. His palm pressed against her, and the heat of his touch burned. Leora's back arched before she could stop it. A soft moan escaped her lips. I like you like this, Kavi murmured into her ear. His breath was hot. I like how you fold at my touch. You pretend you don't want this, but your body doesn't lie. It never has. A flash of humiliation hit her, but it was quickly swallowed by a wave of desire. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. She didn't even care to try. Kavi moved with controlled, deliberate motions. He knew exactly what he was doing. The pleasure built steadily, ripping through her and leaving her weak. If he wasn't pinning her down, she was sure she would have collapsed. Kavi, she breathed as his rhythm intensified. He hushed her with another kiss. Liora clutched his coat again. This time, she wasn't just pulling him closer, she was letting herself go. She was arching into his control. Kavi groaned low in his chest, as if her surrender was exactly what he needed. That's it, he muttered. Look at you. His eyes were dark and fixed on hers. Liora felt tears sting her eyes. They were tears of frustration and maddening desire. She couldn't form words. She could barely think. Her hips moved on their own, meeting his pace. Say it, Kavi demanded. Say you want me. Liora bit her lip, clinging to the last shred of her pride. She refused to say the words. But her body did the talking for her. As the tension reached a breaking point, her lips fell open and a raw cry echoed through the cabin. Kavi didn't give her a second to recover. He moved away, the cold air hitting her skin for only a moment. He quickly shed his coat and shirt. His muscles rippled in the firelight as he prepared to finish what they started. He was impressive, a fact he clearly knew by the smug look on his face. "My eyes are up here," he teased softly. Their eyes met. His chest heaved and his breaths were ragged. This was the last chance to stop. This was the moment to turn back before their marriage became even more complicated. But neither of them moved to end it. Kavi moved forward, his strength filling her completely. The shock stole the air from Liora's lungs. Her nails clawed at his shoulders as she adjusted to him. "You were made for me, Liora," he groaned, his forehead pressing against hers. The truth in his voice felt primal. It rushed through her like a physical force. Kavi set a relentless pace. He didn't give her a moment to adjust, forcing her body to keep up with his punishing rhythm. The pleasure was blinding. Liora's toes curled, and her nails raked down his back. Kavi's grip never faltered. One hand fisted in her hair while the other held her firm. He was everywhere. He was over her, inside her, and surrounding her. Liora lost track of where she ended and where he began. "Don't you ever think about leaving again," Kavi growled. "You aren't going anywhere, Liora," Kavi growled, his voice thick with a hunger he couldn't hide. He pressed her back against the worn cushions of the couch. The air in the small cabin felt heavy and electric. Kavi could feel the heat radiating off her skin. It was a magnetic pull that he had fought for far too long. Now that he finally had her in his arms, the world outside simply stopped existing. He moved with a primal rhythm, his body sinking into hers. The sensation was overwhelming. She fit against him like she was made for him. Every curve of her body seemed designed to match his own. Kavi felt a jolt of pure adrenaline shoot through his spine. He had spent years thinking he was in control, but this woman made him feel like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. "Liora," he breathed her name, his eyes locked on hers. He was doomed. He didn't need a fortune teller or a pack elder to tell him that. He could feel it in the way his wolf paced just beneath the surface of his skin. His instincts were screaming at him, demanding he claim her, hold her, and never let her go. His breath came in heavy, ragged pants as the scent of her skin filled his lungs. It was a mix of salt and sweetness that made his head spin. Kavi pushed deeper, wanting to embed himself in her memory. He wanted her to feel him long after the sun came up. He wanted to be a permanent part of her. The logic he usually relied on had vanished. There was no political benefit to this. There was no rational reason to be this obsessed. It was pure, unadulterated madness, but he didn't care. Liora's nails dug into the skin of his back. He felt the sharp sting as she dragged them down, leaving marks that burned like fire. Kavi didn't flinch. Instead, he tightened his grip on her. He welcomed the pain because it meant she was reacting. It meant she was right there with him, lost in the same storm. Her body tightened around him with every movement. Kavi felt like he was losing his mind. Every nerve in his body was on fire. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, hitting the same frantic beat as her own. He leaned down and captured her lips again. He tasted salt. She was crying. The realization hit him like a physical blow, but it didn't make him stop. He felt a strange connection to her heart in that moment. He knew she was overwhelmed. He knew the sensations were crashing over her like a tidal wave. He knew he should probably slow down or give her a moment to breathe. But he couldn't. The wolf inside him wouldn't allow it. "You're mine," he whispered against her skin. The broken, muffled cry she made against his shoulder sent a shiver through him. It filled a hollow space in his chest that had been empty for years. Every time she gasped his name, every time she arched her back to meet him, his inner wolf growled the same word over and over. "Mine." She wrapped her arms around his neck, holding on as if she were drowning. She wasn't pushing him away. She wasn't fighting him. Her surrender was a silent contract, one that Kavi intended to enforce for the rest of their lives. "Do you feel that?" Kavi murmured into her ear. His voice sounded like gravel and honey. "You fit me too perfectly. This isn't an accident, Liora. This is fate." She trembled underneath him. He wasn't sure if it was because of his words or the way he moved, but he didn't give her time to process it. He didn't want her to think. If she started thinking, she would remember the life she left behind. She would remember the man she was supposed to be with. She would remember all the reasons she was supposed to hate him. Kavi shifted his weight, changing the pace. He moved slower and deeper, finding the exact rhythm that made her breath hitch and her eyes flutter shut. He reached out, catching her chin in his hand to force her to look at him. "Don't look away," he commanded. Her eyes opened, shimmering with tears. She looked vulnerable and small, yet there was still a spark of defiance in her gaze. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He realized he could easily ruin her life, but he didn't want to leave scars. He wanted to weave himself so deeply into her soul that she would never be whole without him again. He wanted her to crave this. He wanted her to wake up in the middle of the night reaching for him. Even if she ran to the ends of the earth, he wanted her body to remember exactly how he felt. The couch creaked under the weight of their movements. Kavi's focus narrowed until she was the only thing in the universe. He watched the way she clutched at him, looking terrified and starving all at once. It was a look that fueled his fire. "Stay with me," he urged, his voice cracking. Leora's body suddenly went rigid. Her breath caught in her throat, and she let out a long, shaky cry as the tension finally snapped. Kavi felt the ripple effect of her release, and it was the final straw for his own crumbling restraint. He let out a guttural growl, his forehead pressing against hers as he gave in to the same overwhelming wave. They stayed like that for a long time, tangled together as their breathing slowly returned to normal. The small cabin was silent, save for the sound of the wind whistling through the trees outside. To Kavi, the rest of the pack, the war, and the world didn't matter. He didn't pull away. He kept his hand resting lightly against the side of her neck, his thumb grazing her skin. It was a gentle touch, but it was also a reminder. A mark of his presence. "I told you once before," Kavi whispered, his voice hoarse from the effort. "I'm never giving you back." Leora's lips quivered. She didn't say a word, and she didn't move to push him off. She just lay there, her body still humming from the encounter. Kavi watched her, a dark sense of satisfaction settling in his chest. The silence wasn't a rejection. In the world of wolves and hunters, silence like this was as good as a total surrender. "Are you going to fight me tomorrow?" he asked softly. "Come on. Liora, you need to warm up," Kavi said, his voice cutting through the fog of her thoughts. She didn't move at first. The lake house sat like a silent ghost in the gray light of dawn, unchanged despite the storm that had just rearranged her entire world. As she stepped over the threshold, a heavy sense of displacement settled in her chest. The familiar walls felt like a stranger's home. She felt like she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Kavi's heavy coat still weighed on her shoulders. It smelled of wood smoke and the sharp scent of his skin. Every time she moved, the fabric shifted, reminding her of the cabin, the heat of the fire, and the way she had clung to him while the wind screamed outside. Guilt coiled in her stomach like a cold snake. She thought of Carmel, then immediately felt a flash of anger at herself. Her loyalty to him had been shattered by his own hands when he left her to face the storm alone. She didn't owe him a thing, yet the weight of the night felt like a mistake she was already starting to regret. Kavi had warned her. He had told her that staying with him in that cabin might be the worst decision she ever made. He was proving himself right. The car ride back had been a wall of silence. Kavi had kept his fists clenched tight on the steering wheel, his eyes locked on the road, never once looking back at the forest. Liora had kept her distance, unable to face the reality of what had happened between them. She wanted to pretend it was a dream, but the memory clung to her skin as surely as the scent of the storm. "The heater is on," Kavi noted, his voice flat as he watched her. The house was busier than they had left it. New faces in crisp uniforms moved through the halls with practiced efficiency. Grandfather Elon had clearly arrived. Whenever the patriarch of the family showed up, the casual atmosphere maintained by Melek and Shira vanished, replaced by a cold, corporate chill. Staff members hurried toward them with steaming trays of food and fresh towels. Kavi had called ahead as soon as he found a signal at dawn. He hadn't mentioned the danger. He hadn't accused Carmel of anything. He had simply told the family they were safe. Liora watched him, her brow furrowing. The Kavi she knew lived for the chance to tear Carmel down. Why was he staying silent now? She couldn't believe he was being kind. He was likely just waiting for a more lethal moment to strike, and the thought that he might use her as his weapon made her stomach turn. As they walked through the sitting room, Liora saw a news broadcast flickering on a silent television. The headlines were full of praise for the Elon hunting event, calling it a massive success. There was no mention of the search and rescue teams or the woman nearly lost to the woods. The Elons were cleaning the slate. They valued their reputation more than her life. They had covered up the cheating, the divorce, and the scandals, and now they were covering up the fact that she had almost died. To the world, she was still the villain in their carefully crafted story. Kavi noticed her staring at the screen. He stepped into her line of sight, his expression unreadable. Is he wrong? Liora whispered to herself, the voice in her head echoing Kavi's usual taunts. Was she not angry enough? Was she really going to let them sweep this under the rug? She followed Kavi toward the stairs, her legs feeling heavy. Every step reminded her of the night before. She could still feel the phantom touch of his hands, the way he had claimed her as if he owned her. She hated how much power that memory held over her. Mrs. Elon, a maid said softly, stepping into their path. Kavi cut the woman off with a sharp flick of his wrist. We're fine. Where is Joel? Fast asleep, sir, the maid replied quickly, bowing her head. Your grandfather left instructions. You are to go to his study the moment you arrive. We will see Joel first, Kavi said. It wasn't a request. We'll go to the study after. The maid didn't argue. She scurried away to deliver the news of Kavi's defiance. Kavi didn't seem to care about the old man's orders. He began walking up the stairs, pulling off his leather gloves. He moved with the effortless confidence of a man who knew he held all the cards. Liora's steps faltered at the top of the hallway. She didn't want her son to see her like this, haggard, shaken, and wearing Kavi's scent like a brand. Kavi stopped and turned. He leaned against the wall, watching her with the patience of a predator. A dark, mocking tilt touched the corner of his mouth. Why are you stopping? He asked, his voice sharp. Now that we're back, do you regret giving up the chance to crawl back to Carmel? Liora's eyes narrowed. The sting of his words brought her back to life. Don't start, Kavi. The cruel half-smile deepened. What's the matter? Are you afraid I'll make you remember him? I don't need your help with that, she snapped, her voice low and dangerous. A dark flash crossed Kavi's eyes. He pushed off the wall and closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He loomed over her, his presence suffocating. Even after he left you for dead, he asked, his head tilting to the side. You're still going to defend him? You're still worried about what he thinks? Liora's fists clenched into the fabric of his coat. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that her silence wasn't about Carmel, it was about the terrifying way Kavi made her feel. But the words wouldn't come. Kavi didn't push her further. He brushed past her and opened the door to their room. The sight of Joel curled up on the bed, safe and sound, made the tension drain out of Liora's shoulders. Mora, the nanny, gave a small, sympathetic nod as she slipped out of the room, leaving them alone with the sleeping boy. Kavi walked over to Liora and reached for the heavy coat she was wearing. He pulled it from her shoulders, but before she could feel the chill, he draped a clean, dry jacket over her. He tucked the collar around her neck, his movements firm and deliberate. It felt less like a gesture of care and more like he was putting armor on her. Or a leash. Sit, he commanded quietly. Leora's knees buckled, and she sat on the edge of the sofa. The new jacket also smelled of him, mint and cold earth. He moved to the heater, adjusting the dial until the room began to glow with warmth. When he turned back, the dim light cast deep shadows across his jawline. He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze heavy with the weight of everything they hadn't said. He looked like a man who wanted to remind her exactly how she had screamed his name in the dark. Liora glanced at Joel, her heart hammering. She couldn't let him speak of it. Not here. Kavi didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He simply watched her, knowing he had carved a place for himself under her skin that no one else could reach. You're not going to mention the cabin to your grandfather, are you? Liora asked, her voice trembling. Kavi's expression remained a mask of cold stone. I don't give away my leverage for free, Liora. Don't mistake me for him, Kavi said. He dropped into the wooden chair across from Liora. I don't play house. Liora pulled the edges of his heavy coat tighter around her shoulders. The fabric still held the warmth of his body. She looked at the door to the bedroom where Joel slept. Kavi had already gone in twice to tuck the boy in. He acted like he didn't care, yet his actions told a different story. The contradiction made her heart ache. She wanted to hate him. Part of her did. But the unwanted feelings he stirred up were harder to fight than any storm. The room fell silent. Liora kept her eyes on her son's sleeping form. Watching the slow rise and fall of his chest was the only thing keeping her calm. It stopped her mind from drifting back to the cabin. It stopped her from hearing the sound of Kavi's voice in the dark or remembering the heat of his touch. She hated him for what happened between them. Most of all, she hated herself for letting things get so complicated. Liora. The voice sliced through the quiet. Liora snapped her head up. Carmel stood in the doorway. The morning sun glowed behind him, casting his shadow long across the floor. He looked better. The redness from his allergic reaction had faded. His white shirt was crisp and perfectly pressed. Carmel didn't move. His steady gaze traveled over Liora. It slowed when it reached the base of her neck. Liora felt a chill. She knew there was a faint mark there. It was a brand Kavi had left behind. Carmel's eyes darkened with a look of pure pain. Kavi didn't get up. He leaned back in his chair and let a dangerous smile touch his lips. You're up early, Cam. Looking for something? Or someone? Carmel stepped into the room, his face hardening. Someone has to make sure the summit is still on track, he said. He looked between Kavi and Liora. It seems the two of you managed well enough on your own. We did, Kavi said. His tone was sharp and slow. Carmel turned his back on Kavi and stepped closer to Liora. Liora, I'm so sorry. I know saying it doesn't fix things. But I'll make it up to you. I promise I would never let you get hurt. He spoke as if Kavi wasn't even in the room. He spoke as if Liora was his sole responsibility. Cam, you're overstepping, Kavi said. His voice was deathly cold. Overstepping? Carmel countered. That isn't your boundary to set, Kavi. Liora is her own person. If she didn't want to hear me out, she wouldn't be standing here. Liora felt the air in the room grow thin. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. She couldn't let them keep going. The storm was worse than we thought, Liora interrupted. She kept her voice flat and steady. We found a place to stay until it passed. I'm fine. Let's just drop it. Carmel's mouth twisted into a ghost of a smile. It wasn't happy. His eyes were filled with doubt and a sense of possession he had no right to feel. But the Elon brothers never cared about what they had a right to do. They took what they wanted. The summit is in 2 days, Carmel said, turning back to his brother. Melek wants us to go over the list of the northern packs. Kavi lounged back, looking completely unbothered. Of course. They began talking about logistics and travel plans. On the surface, it sounded like a normal business meeting. Underneath, every word felt like a weapon. Carmel kept glancing at Liora. Kavi didn't bother to hide it. He stared at her openly, making sure Carmel saw exactly how comfortable they had become. Liora felt like she was suffocating. The heat between the two men was rising. "I think you should both go," Liora said, cutting them off. "I don't want you to wake Joel." Both men looked at the toddler sleeping on the bed. "You're right," Carmel said softly. "He cried for hours asking for you. I couldn't get him to stop. I took him to my room to play for a while. I think I finally wore him out. He needs the rest." Liora felt a sharp pang in her chest. She didn't look at Kavi. She knew nothing made him angrier than the idea of Joel being close to Carmel. "Thank you," Liora whispered. "Don't thank me," Carmel said. He gave her a small, sad smile and walked out of the room. The silence that followed was heavy and dark. Kavi stood up. He walked toward her until he was standing right in her space. "Thank you," Kavi growled. "For what?" "For leaving you behind in the woods." "Kavi, stop," Liora muttered. "He had his reasons." "Reasons," Kavi repeated. His eyes turned black with rage. "Or are you just blind to what he is? Do I need to remind you who you belong to? I thought I made that clear last night." Leora's breath hitched. She couldn't do this. She turned and ran into the bathroom, clicking the lock behind her. She leaned her back against the door and tried to breathe. "You can't run from me, Liora," Kavi's voice drifted through the wood of the door. "You and we're already damned." Liora closed her eyes. He was right. She thought the storm in the woods was the danger. But standing in this house with both brothers, she realized the real storm was just beginning. She had to get Joel away from the Elons. It was the only way to keep him safe. Kavi's shadow moved away from the door. "Get dressed," Kavi called out. "We're leaving in 10 minutes. Are you going to eat, or just stare at the steam until it disappears?" Kavi's voice cut through the silence like a dull blade. Liora didn't look at him. She kept her back straight and her hands folded tightly in her lap. The dining hall of the lake house felt too big and too quiet. Sunlight poured through the high windows, making the polished wood of the long table shine like a mirror. It was a beautiful morning, but the air felt heavy. Alpha Melek and Luna Shira were gone again. With the pack summit coming up, they were busy playing politics. Liora envied them. She wanted to be anywhere else but sitting in this room with the Elons. The staff had set out bowls of hot porridge, fresh bread, and fruit. It smelled like a home should, but the tension ruined it. Leora's stomach was a ball of knots. Every time a chair scraped the floor or a fork hit a plate, she flinched. Kavi sat right next to her. He was close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his body. He poured himself a cup of black coffee with the calm look of a man who owned the world. He didn't look at her, but he didn't have to. His presence was a weight she couldn't shake. Under the table, his knee nudged hers. It wasn't an accident. It was a claim. Across the table, Carmel was watching them. He hadn't said a word, but his blue eyes were sharp. He looked like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't like. Then there was Ziva. Liora was surprised the girl was still here. Ziva looked terrible. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands shook so hard she could barely hold her silk robe closed. She looked small and fragile, a far cry from the woman who had tried to ruin Leora's life just days ago. Carmel's fork scraped loudly against his china. He cut his eggs with jagged, angry motions. He looked from Ziva to Liora, his jaw tight. When his eyes landed on Kavi, his expression darkened even more. "Liora," Ziva said. Her voice was high and fake sweet. "You look exhausted. I thought I heard people walking in the halls late last night. Did you have trouble sleeping?" Leora's heart skipped. She looked up, her pulse racing. Ziva couldn't possibly know about the night before. Kavi didn't give Liora a chance to stumble over an answer. He leaned back, a slow smirk spreading across his face. She slept just fine, he said. In fact, she slept better than fine. Ziva's face twitched. She looked over at Carmel, waiting for him to explode. Carmel didn't yell, but his shoulders turned to stone. He stopped eating, his fork hanging in midair. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Grandfather Elon cleared his throat. The old man's voice was like gravel. The summit is almost here, the grandfather said. Our rivals are looking for a crack in the foundation. They want to see us weak. He looked back and forth between Kavi and Carmel. I will not let that happen. Kavi set his coffee cup down. The sound was soft but final. There are no weaknesses here. He said it with a smile, but it felt like a slap to the face for the rest of the family. Especially for Carmel. Strength is more than just acting tough, Kavi, Carmel snapped. Being a leader means knowing how to talk to people. Diplomacy matters. Kavi laughed, a short, dark sound. Is that what you call it? I call it letting people slide daggers into your back while you're busy smiling at them. Liora felt the blood drain from her face. Kavi was talking about Alpha Tau and the incident during the hunt. She hadn't told Kavi anything about it, yet he knew. Carmel's eyes locked onto Liora's. He looked hurt. He looked like he had been betrayed by the one person he thought was on his side. Liora gripped her napkin so hard her knuckles turned white. She wanted to tell him she hadn't said a word, but she knew he wouldn't believe her. Not while she was sitting this close to Kavi. It wasn't me, Ziva whispered suddenly. Everyone stopped. They all turned to look at Ziva, who was staring at her plate. A single tear rolled down her cheek. The hottest mall incident, Ziva sobbed, her voice trembling. I'm being framed. I had nothing to do with any of it. The grandfather tapped his knife against the table. The sharp clink made Ziva jump. Ziva, he said, his voice cold enough to freeze the room. You have made a mess of this family's name. Did you really think I wouldn't find out what you've been doing? Ziva paled. She reached for her juice glass, nearly knocking it over. I only did what I thought was best for the family. You did what was best for yourself, Kavi interrupted. He didn't raise his voice, but the power behind it made the room feel smaller. He looked at Ziva with total disgust. You pushed Liora off a balcony. That isn't family loyalty, Ziva. That's attempted murder. The table went dead silent. Every head turned toward Liora, the weight of their stares pinning her to her seat. Tell them, Liora, Kavi said softly. Tell them exactly what she did to you. The heat of a dozen glares burned into the side of Liora's face. She stared at her plate, wishing she could vanish. This was exactly what she feared. All their dirty secrets were out in the open, and she was right in the center of the blast zone. Ziva didn't even try to deny it anymore. The evidence was too loud. Instead, she turned her venom on Kavi. You've always hated me, Kavi, Ziva snapped. Her voice was shrill and desperate. You twist every single thing I do. You make it look vile. It is vile, Kavi said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. And so are you. Ziva's mouth hung open. She looked like she had been slapped. She turned her head toward Carmel, her eyes filling with tears. Say something, she whispered. Carmel, tell them you don't believe this. Tell them they're lying. Carmel didn't look at her. He picked up his knife and set it back down. The metal clinked against the fine china like a gunshot. He leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of stone. Don't make a scene, he said. His voice was so cold it made the air in the room feel thin. Liora felt a shiver run down her spine. Ziva looked like she was about to collapse. Her lips trembled as she realized her husband wasn't coming to save her. I believe Kavi knows what happens to people who make false claims in this house, Carmel added. Enough. Grandfather shouted. He slammed his cane against the floor. The wooden thud silenced everyone. Ziva, you are a disgrace to this name. I don't want to hear another word from you until the mess at Hottest Mall is fixed. Is that clear? Ziva reached out to grab Carmel's hand, but he pulled away. He didn't even look at her. He acted like she was a stranger. Liora almost felt a pang of pity for her. Almost. Now that grandfather knew the truth, Carmel was done with Ziva. He had no use for a wife who was a liability. The evidence is clear, grandfather grumbled. No more excuses. Ziva began to sob quietly. I swear, you have to believe me. But nobody was listening to Ziva anymore. Carmel's eyes had moved. He was staring at Liora again. Liora felt his gaze like a physical weight. It was heavy and dark. Next to her, Kavi's hand moved. He placed it firmly on Leora's thigh under the table. He squeezed. It wasn't a comfort. It was a mark. Carmel's jaw tightened. He saw the movement. He saw the way Kavi claimed her. The look in Carmel's eyes wasn't the look of a brother-in-law or an uncle. It was the look of a man watching someone else hold his property. He looked at Liora like she still belonged to him. The tension was so thick Liora could taste it. Ziva saw it too. She glared at Liora through her tears, her face twisted with pure hate. Liora felt the heat crawling under her skin. She reached for her water glass, her hands shaking. Kavi was faster. He slid the glass toward her before she could grab it. His fingers stayed on the rim for a second too long. It was a show. He was telling Carmel exactly who Liora was with now. Liora clenched her fists in her lap. She felt like a pawn on a chessboard. She had always known she was a tool for these men, but today, the feeling was suffocating. Carmel's fork clattered against his plate. He looked like he was about to jump across the table. Enough, grandfather barked again. He poked the floor with his cane. The summit is in 2 days. Keep your petty fights out of my sight. We have a reputation to protect. The rest of the meal was silent. The only sounds were the scraping of forks and the pouring of coffee. Liora couldn't eat a single bite. Her stomach was tied in knots. Kavi, however, ate like nothing had happened. He looked perfectly calm. He had just set his brother's marriage on fire, and he was enjoying his breakfast. Liora knew why. He was waiting. He was waiting for Carmel to snap and reach for her. And the moment Carmel made a move, Kavi would trap him. Kavi had been raising Liora like a prize bird for 3 years, just to use her as bait. This was just a normal Tuesday for the Elon family. Grandfather finally finished. He stood up, leaning on his cane, and waved a hand to dismiss them. He was already answering a call on his phone, muttering about the summit. Liora pushed her chair back carefully. She wanted to run. As she walked past Kavi, his hand brushed against the small of her back. It was another small, possessive touch. Liora wondered if he did it because he liked her, or just because he knew Carmel was watching. She hurried out of the dining hall and headed for the stairs. She heard footsteps behind her. They were heavy and fast. She didn't have to look to know who it was. In the upstairs hallway, a hand grabbed her wrist. Kavi pulled her into a shadow behind a stone pillar. He pinned her against the wall before she could pull away. His chest was pressed against hers. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating off his skin. He looked down at her, his eyes dark and unreadable. His thumb traced the pulse point on her wrist. It was beating fast. You see how fast he turned on her, Kavi whispered. His voice was low and rough. Just like he turned on you all those years ago. Liora felt a sharp pain in her chest at the memory. She tried to look away, but he wouldn't let her. That's who Carmel is, Liora, Kavi said. He leaned in closer, his breath fanning over her face. He'll turn on you again. It's only a matter of time. Liora swallowed hard. Her throat felt like it was full of sand. You wanted to ruin her, she said, her voice flat. And you did. Is that enough for you? Kavi let out a small, dark smirk. This was just the first step. Liora's heart sank. She saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't love. It was a thirst for blood. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to destroy Carmel. Whatever had happened between them the night before didn't matter now. The fire, the kisses, the soft words, none of it was enough to stop him. Kavi had a mission, and he was going to finish it. Liora realized she couldn't forget the truth either. She was the weapon, and the war was just beginning. Are you ready for the next part? Kavi asked. You're trembling, Kavi said. His voice was low, like a secret shared in a graveyard. Liora didn't look at him. She kept her eyes locked on her own reflection, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. It's cold in this house, Kavi, she replied. Her voice was thin, but she managed to keep it steady. The walls are thin and the memories are even thinner. Kavi didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers lingered on the nape of her neck. He had just finished securing the diamond pendant he'd sent to her room. It felt heavy against her skin, like a gilded collar. The heat is on, Liora. We both know why you're shaking. He stepped closer. In the mirror, he looked like a shadow looming over her. He was dressed in black, a crisp shirt with the top buttons open and a tie hanging loosely around his neck. He looked effortless and dangerous. He looked exactly like a man who always got what he wanted. Liora pulled away, smoothing the skirt of the black silk dress. It was the kind of dress that didn't just fit, it clung. It mapped out every curve of her body, leaving her feeling exposed despite the elegant length. Why are we doing this? She asked, turning to face him. Another dinner? Another night of playing pretend for your grandfather's friends? It's a private dinner with the top alphas, Kavi said, his expression softening into a mask of cold professionalism. Grandfather wants a show of unity before the summit tomorrow. You are a Elan. You will play the part. Liora let out a sharp, dry laugh. A Elan wife. A trophy. Is that all I am to you, Kavi? Something shiny to put on your arms so people don't see the cracks in this family? Kavi took a step toward her, his eyes darkening. The air in the room felt heavy, the silence pressing in on them. You're the mother of my son. That makes you more than a trophy. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder? Liora stepped up to him, her chest nearly brushing his. I fell off a balcony 5 days ago. I almost died in a snowstorm. And now, you want me to smile and drink wine with people who wouldn't care if I disappeared tomorrow. Kavi reached out, his thumb grazing her jawline. His touch was electric, a reminder of the night they'd spent together at the cabin, a night Liora was desperately trying to forget. I would care, he whispered. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For a second, the mask slipped. She saw the man behind the alpha, the one who had held her when the world was freezing over. But then, he pulled his hand back and adjusted his cuffs. The mask was back. Finish getting ready, he said, his tone turning clinical again. The guests will be here in 10 minutes. Don't keep them waiting. He turned and walked toward the door, his movements fluid and confident. He didn't knock when he entered, and he didn't look back when he left. Liora turned back to the mirror. She looked beautiful. The dress was perfect, the diamonds were bright, and her makeup hid the exhaustion in her eyes. She looked like the perfect wife for a powerful man. But as she reached for her evening bag, she saw her hands. They were still shaking. She took a deep breath, forcing the air into her lungs. She thought of Joel, sleeping down the hall with his nanny. He was the only reason she stayed. He was the only thing in this house that wasn't a lie. She walked out of the room and headed toward the grand staircase. The lake house was bustling now. The staff had returned in full force, moving like ghosts through the hallways, setting tables and lighting candles. The scent of expensive food and wood smoke filled the air. At the bottom of the stairs, her grandfather stood waiting. Sila Elan looked as regal as ever, his cane gripped in one hand. He smiled when he saw her, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Liora," Sela said, his voice booming. "You look radiant." A true credit to the name. "Thank you, grandfather," she said, her voice robotic. "The Alphas are eager to meet the woman who tamed Kavi," Sela continued, leaning in closer. "Make sure you tell them how much you're enjoying the trip. We need them to see stability." "Stability," Liora repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" Sela's grip tightened on his cane. "I'm calling it a necessity. Now, go. Join your husband." Liora walked into the dining room. Kavi was already there, standing by the fireplace with a glass of dark liquid in his hand. He was talking to a tall, broad-shouldered man who looked like he could snap a tree trunk with his bare hands. Kavi looked up as she approached. He didn't smile, but he reached out and tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. His skin was warm, and despite her anger, she found herself leaning into him. It was a reflex. A survival instinct. "Ah, the lovely Liora," the stranger said, bowing his head slightly. "I've heard much about you." "Only good things, I hope," Liora said, flashing a practiced smile. "Mostly stories of your bravery in the storm," the man replied. "Kavi was quite frantic when you were missing. I've never seen him lose his cool like that." Liora glanced at Kavi. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight. "He's very protective," Liora said, her voice dripping with subtle sarcasm. The dinner was a blur of expensive wine and empty conversation. Liora sat at Kavi's side, nodding when she was supposed to and laughing at jokes that weren't funny. She felt like an actress on a stage, performing a play she hadn't rehearsed. Across the table, she noticed a woman watching her. She was older, with sharp eyes and a grace that suggested she had sat through 1,000 dinners just like this one. "You seem a long way away, dear," the woman said during a lull in the conversation. "Just enjoying the evening," Liora replied. "The lake house has a way of pulling people into their own heads," the woman said. "Be careful. If you stay in there too long, you might not find your way back out." Kavi's grip on Liora's hand tightened under the table. "My wife is perfectly fine," Kavi said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. The woman just smiled and took a sip of her wine. As the night wore on, the air in the room grew stifling. Liora felt the walls closing in. Every laugh felt like a scream, and every polite comment felt like a lie. She needed to get out. "Excuse me," she whispered to Kavi. "I need some air." "Wait," he said, catching her wrist. "I'm just going to the balcony," she said. "I won't fall this time. I promise." She pulled her hand away and slipped out the French doors. The night air was freezing, biting at her exposed shoulders, but she welcomed it. It was honest. It was real. She leaned against the stone railing, looking out at the dark expanse of the lake. The water was black, reflecting the cold light of the moon. "You're going to catch a cold." She didn't turn around. She knew the footsteps. "Why did you bring me here, Kavi?" she asked, her back still to him. "Truly. Why am I here?" Kavi stepped onto the balcony, closing the door behind him to shut out the noise of the party. He walked up to her, his presence warm against her back. "Because you're my wife," he said. "That's a contract, not a reason." He turned her around to face him. His eyes were searching hers, looking for something she wasn't sure she wanted to give. "I brought you here because I thought we could find a way back," he said quietly. "Back to what?" "We were never anywhere good, Kavi. We were a business arrangement that accidentally made a child." "Is that all it was to you?" he asked. He stepped closer, pinning her between his body and the railing. "The cabin, that was business?" Liora's breath hitched. "That was a mistake. We were cold and scared." "I wasn't scared," Kavi said, his voice dropping to a low growl. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. Liora could smell the scent of his cologne and the faint hint of bourbon. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to push him away, but her hands stayed flat against his chest. Tell me you don't feel it, he challenged. Tell me you want me to leave you alone. Liora looked into his dark eyes. The tension between them was a physical thing, a wire stretched so tight it was about to snap. I want you to be honest for once, she whispered. Kavi leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear. The truth is, Liora, you're the only thing in this world I can't control. And it's driving me insane. He pulled back, his eyes locked on hers. For a moment, the power dynamic shifted. He wasn't the alpha, and she wasn't the trophy. They were just two people standing in the cold, haunted by a past they couldn't outrun. The door to the balcony creaked open. Kavi? The alpha of the north is asking for a word. Kavi didn't break eye contact for a long second. Then, he stepped back, the cold air rushing into the space between them. Go inside, he said, his voice regaining its hard edge. It's too cold for you out here. I'm used to the cold, Kavi, she said, her voice firm. I've been living in it for years. She walked past him, her head held high. As she stepped back into the warmth of the dining room, she felt the weight of the diamond pendant again. It didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a warning. She found her seat next to her grandfather. He leaned over, his eyes scanning the room. Everything settled? Sila asked. Perfectly, Liora said, picking up her wine glass. The dinner finally came to an end, and the guests began to filter out. Liora stood by the door with Kavi, shaking hands and offering polite goodbyes. Her jaw ached from the fake smiling. Once the last car had pulled away, the house fell into a heavy, ringing silence. Kavi turned to her, loosening his tie and pulling it off completely. You did well tonight. Am I dismissed, Alpha? She asked, her voice laced with bitterness. Kavi looked at her, his expression unreadable. Liora, stop. Stop what? Playing the part? I'm exhausted, Kavi. I'm going to see Joel. She turned to walk away, but Kavi caught her arm. The summit starts at 8 tomorrow, he said. Be ready. Liora looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. Are you worried I'll embarrass you in front of the whole council? Kavi's grip didn't loosen. I'm worried you'll realize you don't need me at all. He let go and walked toward his study, leaving Liora standing alone in the grand hallway. She climbed the stairs, her feet heavy on the plush carpet. When she reached Joel's room, she cracked the door open. He was fast asleep, his small hand tucked under his cheek. She sat on the edge of his bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest. This was the only place she felt safe. The only place where she wasn't Liora Elon, the wife or the trophy. She reached out and smoothed his hair. I'll get us out of here, Joel, she whispered to the quiet room. I promise. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lake one last time. Tomorrow was the summit. Tomorrow, the games would truly begin. And she knew, deep in her bones, that not everyone would make it out of this trip in one piece. She left the room and headed toward her own. As she passed Kavi's study, she saw the light flickering under the door. He was still awake, probably planning his next move. She went into her room and closed the door, leaning her back against the wood. She reached behind her, struggling with the zipper of the black silk dress. Her fingers fumbled, the silk slippery against her skin. A knock sounded at the door. Low and steady. Liora froze. Who is it? It's me, Kavi's voice came through the wood. Liora hesitated. She should tell him to go away. She should lock the door. But her hand reached for the handle instead. She opened the door just a crack. Kavi was standing there, his shirt unbuttoned, his eyes tired but sharp. You forgot something, he said. He held out a small, leather-bound book. Liora recognized it immediately. It was her journal, the one she thought she'd lost in the snow. Where did you find this? She asked, reaching for it. Kavi didn't hand it over. He held it just out of reach. I found it near the balcony, he said. I read the first page, Liora. Leora's heart stopped. The first page was where she had written her plan to leave him. Kavi, give it back, she said, her voice trembling. Kavi stepped into the room, forcing her to move back. He closed the door behind him with a soft click. You're planning to run, he said, his voice a dangerous whisper. Liora backed away, her heart racing. I'm doing what's best for my son. Kavi threw the journal onto the bed. He stepped close, his presence overwhelming. Do you really think I'd let you take him? He asked. You can't keep us here forever, Kavi. Watch me, he growled. He reached out, grabbing her waist and pulling her flush against him. The anger and the tension from the entire week finally boiled over. Are you going to stop me? She challenged, her eyes defiant. Kavi leaned down, his breath hot against her lips. I'm going to make sure you never want to leave. Maybe because this feels like a shiny noose, Liora said. Her voice sounded flat and empty. It is suffocating. Kavi did not flinch. He leaned down until his lips brushed her ear. His breath felt hot against her skin. Noose or diamonds, it does not matter, Kavi whispered. It is my mark. Wear it proudly. If they want to hang you, they will burn for touching what belongs to me. His words felt like heavy weights. Liora kept her mouth shut. She did not want to give him the satisfaction of a response. She was not worried about other people. She was worried about him. Kavi was the one tightening the rope. He was the one pulling her strings like she was a puppet he bought at an auction. If she spoke, she might spit in his face. Or worse, she might beg for his touch again. Neither choice ended well for her. Kavi grazed the side of her neck with his nose. He took a deep breath. You are still angry about yesterday. It was not a question. He knew exactly what he did. He knew he would do it again. Kavi stayed close for a long moment. Liora held her breath. Her heart hammered against her ribs until he finally pulled away. He ran his hand down her back and turned toward the door. We should go, Kavi said. He sounded perfectly calm. Liora exhaled slowly. She hated how he could set her blood on fire and act like nothing happened. She followed him out of the room. She did not have a choice. The hallway smelled like expensive wood polish and something sweet. Her heels sank into the thick rug as they reached the top of the stairs. Kavi stopped suddenly. Liora stepped up beside him and saw why. Carmel was waiting at the bottom. He leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Liora, Carmel said. The way he said her name made it sound like it belonged to him. Kavi took a slow step down the stairs. He moved his body to block Liora from Carmel's view. It was a protective, territorial move. Carmel, Kavi said. His voice was sharp enough to cut skin. Liora felt a chill run down her spine. Carmel did not look at Kavi. He kept his eyes locked on Liora. He looked her up and down without any shame. His gaze stopped on the diamond piece at her throat. You look stunning, Liora, Carmel said. He paused for a second. Always. The lighting in this house was made for you. Liora gripped the wooden railing. Her knuckles turned white. He was not talking about the lamps. He was talking about a memory. They had been in this house on a rainy night years ago. The lights had flickered out. Carmel fixed them himself while she watched. That was the night they shared their secrets. Carmel remembered. He was using those memories like a weapon right in front of Kavi. Kavi narrowed his eyes. He could feel the tension, even if he did not know the history. He moved down the stairs with slow, predatory steps. He looked like a hunter closing in on his prey. Careful, Kavi said. It was a cold warning. Carmel lived here, but Kavi owned the room. Kavi acted like an alpha in every way that mattered. Carmel forced a small, fake smile. I am just being polite. Do not, Kavi replied. The silence between the three of them stretched thin. Liora felt like she was going to snap. She had to break the pressure before someone got hurt. I should go find Shira, Liora whispered. Kavi turned his gaze toward her. He held out his hand. It was a silent dare. He wanted her to choose him while Carmel watched. He wanted to show everyone who she belonged to. Liora clenched her fists. She knew the cost of saying no. She reached out and placed her hand in Kavi's palm. He gripped her fingers tight and pulled her close. He put his other hand on the small of her back to lead her away. As they walked past, Liora felt Carmel's stare burning into her back. Don't look back, Kavi muttered. There are rumors about a change in the leadership of the Elan pack, a young alpha said, breaking the silence of the dining hall. The sound of silverware hitting porcelain stopped instantly. A few guests exchanged quick, nervous glances. It was the question everyone had been thinking since Kavi returned to the city. The partnership with Elan Company made the tension even worse. Most leaders knew to keep their noses out of Elan business, but this new alpha was clearly looking for trouble. He didn't understand the hierarchy yet. The young man leaned forward. If a big change is coming at this summit, don't we have a right to know? Liora kept her eyes on her plate. She cut a small piece of meat and chewed slowly. Kavi had warned her that her peace wouldn't last. She knew she would get dragged into this mess eventually. She was the only common link between Kavi and Carmel besides their titles. Grandfather Elan didn't look up from his meal. I didn't realize you had so much free time for gossip, Alpha Yaakov. His voice was calm, but it carried a sharp edge. Spreading rumors is a dangerous hobby. Alpha Yaakov didn't take the hint. He squared his shoulders. It isn't gossip when the signs are everywhere. I call it a logical deduction. Grandfather Elan finally raised his head. He stared directly at the younger man. Go home. Ask your father to teach you about your rights again. He clearly failed the first time. The hall went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Yaakov looked around the room, his face turning a dark shade of red. He expected someone to back him up, but the other alphas looked away. They weren't going to risk their own standing for a rookie. Yaakov stood up abruptly. His chair legs scraped loudly against the wooden floor. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the cold stare from the head of the table silenced him. He turned and marched out of the hall. His fiancée jumped up and hurried after him, her heels clicking rapidly on the floor. The tension faded as Grandfather Elan went back to his dinner. He acted as if he hadn't just kicked one of the top 10 alphas off the mountain. The meal continued in a more orderly way. No one dared to bring up the Elan succession again. Liora watched the room. She realized Grandfather didn't need to give a speech about the hunt. He had made an example of Yaakov to warn everyone else. If they speculated about Carmel's health or Kavi's return, they would be next. It is such a relief to see Luna Ziva is feeling better, a voice called out. Liora sighed internally. It was Kasia, a Luna she had encountered during the hunt. Kasia gave a fake, sugary smile. We were all so worried when Liora showed up instead of you, Kasia continued. A few other women at the table nodded. They made polite comments about Ziva's health. Ziva remained unusually quiet. She sat perfectly still, likely remembering the warning Grandfather had given her earlier. Kasia wasn't finished. She turned her gaze toward Liora. Liora is quite the icon. Even with a busy husband like Kavi and an empire to run, she still finds time to fill in for her sister-in-law. The jab was obvious. Liora ignored her. She picked up her napkin to dab a stray bit of sauce from her lip, but Kavi moved faster. He took his own napkin and gently wiped her mouth. Liora stayed still. She felt his focus on her. He was careful not to smudge her lip gloss. It was a calculated move. He was showing everyone in the room exactly how much he valued her. He even reached over and began cutting the rest of her steak into perfect, bite-sized pieces. Kasia's face twisted with annoyance. Her attempt to make Liora look like a servant had failed. Will we see more of you at our gatherings after the summit? Kasia asked, her voice high and tight. It can't be easy to stay by Carmel's side for all his public events. Liora focused on her water glass. She had no intention of answering. Kavi might start to feel neglected, Kasia added with a small giggle. Kavi stiffened beside Liora. It was a tiny movement, but she felt the heat radiating from him. He was losing his patience. Why would he feel that way? Carmel asked. The table went quiet again. Liora felt Kavi's grip tighten on his fork. She knew Carmel speaking up was the worst thing that could happen. If he said the wrong thing, Kavi would explode. Kasia blinked, surprised by the interruption. I only mean, well, he is the one married to. Liora has never had trouble being a wife and a Luna, Carmel said, cutting her off. His voice was dismissive and cold. She has always been excellent at both. Liora looked up. Carmel was staring at the table, but his jaw was set tight. You would be wise not to underestimate her, Carmel added. The room felt heavy. There was a strange familiarity in Carmel's voice. It wasn't the tone of a brother-in-law defending a relative. It was the same low, intimate whisper Liora remembered from years ago. It was the voice he used when they were alone in the dark. Liora could feel every eye in the room shifting toward her. The other guests might not know the history, but they could hear the raw emotion in Carmel's words. She doesn't need your defense, Carmel, Kavi said softly. There are whispers of a change in the leadership of the Elan pack. The words came from a young, bold alpha named Yaakov. He broke the silence of the dining hall with the force of a hammer hitting glass. Silverware stopped clinking against fine china in perfect unison. Guests exchanged glances that were both sharp and wary. Liora kept her eyes on her plate. It was no surprise the question had finally surfaced. Ever since Kavi returned and announced his partnership with Elan Company, the air had been thick with speculation. People usually kept their noses out of Elan business for the sake of their own safety. However, these newer alphas who had recently inherited their ranks didn't know the unspoken rules yet. They hadn't learned that some hierarchies were maintained through silence. If such a massive shift is happening at this summit, don't we have a right to a heads up? Yaakov asked. Liora took a slow, deliberate bite of her meal. She remembered Kavi's warning from earlier. It wouldn't be long before the peace vanished. She knew she would be the one caught in the middle. Between Kavi and Carmel, the only constant factor besides their titles was her. Grandfather Elan didn't look up from his meal. His voice was casual, almost bored. I didn't realize you had so much free time for rumors, Alpha Yaakov. Or for spreading them. A seasoned leader would have heard the steel beneath the old man's words and backed down. Yaakov did not. He leaned forward, fueled by his own misplaced confidence. It isn't speculation when every sign points to it. I'd call it a logical deduction. Grandfather Elan finally raised his brow. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Go home, Yaakov. Speak to your father. Ask him to explain your rights to you one more time. And more importantly, ask him to explain what your rights are not. The hall fell into a pin-drop silence. Liora watched the young alpha's face turn from arrogant to pale. Yaakov looked around the room, searching for an ally, but every other alpha suddenly found their dinner very interesting. No one was going to stand up against the Elan patriarch. With a loud, jagged scrape of his chair against the wood floor, Yaakov stood up. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the heavy atmosphere choked the words in his throat. He stormed out of the hall with his fiancée scurrying behind him like a frightened shadow. Grandfather Elan continued eating as if he hadn't just exiled a top-ranking leader from the summit. The tension faded into a forced, orderly calm. Liora noticed that no direct warnings were given to the alphas who had witnessed the recent hunt. They didn't need to be. The message was clear: stay in line or follow Yaakov out the door. Liora hoped the rest of the night would pass in this quiet, controlled manner. She was wrong. It is such a relief to see Luna Ziva looking well, a voice chirped from across the table. Liora recognized the speaker. It was Kasia, a Luna who had a habit of poking at wounds. We were all so worried when Liora showed up instead of her, Kasia continued. Her tone was sugary sweet, but her eyes were cold. A few other Lunas chimed in with performative well wishes for Ziva. Liora glanced at Ziva, expecting a sharp retort or a boastful comment. Instead, Ziva remained strangely quiet. It seemed grandfather's earlier private warnings had finally taken root. Liora is truly an icon, Kasia said, turning her focus directly toward Liora. With a husband as busy as Kavi and an entire empire to run, she still finds the time to fill in for her sister-in-law. The jab was about as subtle as a punch to the face. Liora ignored it. She focused on her steak, chewing slowly and maintaining a mask of indifference. She reached for her napkin to dab a stray drop of juice from her lip, but Kavi was faster. He took his own napkin and gently dabbed her mouth. His brow was furrowed in deep concentration. He moved with a softness that felt out of place in the tense room, careful not to smudge her lip gloss. The table went quiet again. Every eye was on them. Kavi knew it. He took his time, lingering on the gesture before picking up a knife to cut the rest of her steak into perfect, bite-sized pieces. It was a blatant display of affection designed to shut Kasia up. Kasia's face twisted with a flash of heat. She didn't like being ignored. Will we be seeing more of you at these gatherings after the summit? Kasia asked again. It can't be easy for you to stay by Carmel's side as often as his public schedule requires. Liora kept her expression blank. She had no intention of feeding the fire. Beside her, she felt Kavi's muscles lock tight. Kavi might start to feel neglected, Kasia added with a light, mocking giggle. Why would he feel that way? The voice didn't belong to Kavi. It was Carmel. Liora felt Kavi stiffen even more. The air between the two brothers turned electric. Kavi would ignore a woman like Kasia, but he wouldn't ignore Carmel. I only meant that he is the one married to, Kasia started, but her husband gave her a sharp, silencing look. Liora has never had trouble balancing her duties, Carmel interrupted. His voice was steady and dismissive. She has always been excellent as both a wife and a Luna. He paused, his gaze shifting across the table. You would be wise not to underestimate her, Carmel said. The words were simple, but Liora felt a shiver run down her spine. There was a hidden edge to his tone, a specific, low vibration of familiarity. It was the same tone he had used years ago, whispered into her ear in the dark when his hands were the ones holding hers. The other guests seemed to sense the shift. The edge in Carmel's voice was too intimate to be ignored. Kavi's hand gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Is that so, brother? Kavi asked. The balcony door creaked as Liora stepped into the cold morning air. Kavi stood by the railing with his back to her. His broad shoulders looked like they were carved from stone. He didn't turn around when she approached. Is it done? Kavi muttered into his phone. His voice was a low, jagged blade. If Carmel shows up at the lab again, let me know immediately. Liora froze. She stayed in the shadows of the doorway. The wind from the lake whipped her hair across her face, but she didn't move. And make sure my son's DNA report doesn't get into his hands, Kavi snapped. He ended the call and gripped the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. Kavi? Liora whispered. He spun around. The rage in his eyes made her blood run cold. He didn't look like the man she loved. He looked like a hunter who had just found his prey. He didn't yell. He didn't move. He just stared at her with a silence that felt like a physical weight. What was that about? Liora asked. Her voice shook. What about Joel's DNA? Kavi stepped toward her. He stopped just inches away. The heat from his body didn't feel warm. It felt like a warning. I should be asking you, Kavi said. His words were stiff. What happened between you and him in the woods? What are you keeping from me, Liora? Liora felt a lump form in her throat. She thought back to the trees and the shadows. She remembered Carmel's face and the words he had whispered to her. He had confessed his feelings. It was a secret she had buried deep, hoping it would stay there. I don't know what you're talking about, she lied. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I didn't keep anything from you. Kavi let out a short, bitter laugh. It was a sound devoid of any humor. You didn't? Then tell me why Carmel is looking into Joel's paternity. The world seemed to tilt. Liora reached out to grab the door frame to keep her balance. The color drained from her face. What? She gasped. Carmel ordered a DNA test the moment he got back from the woods, Kavi growled. He leaned in closer. He even got a lock of Joel's hair. Tell me, Liora. Does that sound like a coincidence to you? I don't. I didn't tell him anything, she insisted. Kavi's eyes narrowed into slits. Other than me, you're the only person who knows the truth. You spent time alone with him. Now he's at a lab trying to prove my son isn't mine. Kavi, listen to me. No, you listen, Kavi interrupted. His voice dropped to a dangerous level. Is this what you've been after all along? Were you waiting for the right moment to hand my heir to my brother? How can you say that? Liora cried. She reached for his arm, but he flinched away from her touch. I love Joel. I would never put him in danger like this. Then explain how he knows. Kavi roared. The sound echoed across the silent lake. Explain why my brother thinks he has a claim to my child. Liora looked down at the floor. Her mind raced. She thought about the way Carmel had looked at Joel during dinner. She thought about the small, smug smile he always wore. She had been so careful, yet somehow, the predator had caught the scent. He must have seen something, Liora whispered. The way Joel looks, the way we act. He's smart, Kavi. He's cruel and smart. Kavi grabbed her by the shoulders. He didn't hurt her, but his grip was firm. If that report comes back and he uses it against us, the Elon name is finished. The summit starts in an hour. My grandfather is already looking for reasons to take Joel away from both of us. We can stop him, Liora said. You said you have people at the lab. I have people, Kavi said. He let go of her and turned back to the lake. But I don't know if I have you. Not anymore. The words felt like a slap. Liora felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. She couldn't afford to be weak. Not today. The lake house was a cage, and the bars were closing in. I am on your side, Liora said firmly. Whether you believe me or not. We have to get to that summit. We have to protect Joel. Kavi didn't look at her. He adjusted his cuffs and straightened his shirt. The mask of the cold alpha was back in place. The man who had looked at her with love was gone, replaced by a soldier preparing for war. The car is waiting, Kavi said. He walked past her without a second glance. Try to look like a happy mother, Liora. The whole world is watching. Liora watched him walk away. The silence of the house returned, heavier than before. She looked out at the lake one last time. The ripples were gone. The water looked like a sheet of black glass. She had to find Carmel. She had to know exactly what he knew before the first gavel fell at the summit. Liora followed Kavi down the stairs. The guards were standing at the entrance. Their faces were blank. Ziva was sitting on the sofa in the living room. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked up at Liora with a strange expression. It wasn't pity. It was something sharper. You should be careful, Liora, Ziva called out. Liora stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Careful of what? Ziva tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She gave a small, haunting smile. The truth has a way of coming out when people are desperate. And everyone in this house is starving. Liora didn't answer. She pushed through the front doors and stepped into the sunlight. Kavi was already in the back of the black SUV. The engine was humming. She climbed in beside him. He didn't move to make room. He didn't offer his hand. They sat in total silence as the car pulled away from the lake house. As they drove toward the summit venue, Liora watched the trees blur past. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was an unknown number. She opened the message. It was a photo. It was a picture of a lab envelope with the Elon crest on it. Below the photo was a single sentence. Did you really think you could keep him all to yourself? Leora's breath hitched. She looked over at Kavi. He was staring out the window, his jaw set tight. If she showed him the text, he might lose control. If she kept it from him, she was proving him right. The car slowed down as they approached the gates of the summit. Dozens of reporters and guards lined the driveway. Flashbulbs began to pop against the glass of the windows. Liora, Kavi said. He still didn't look at her. Yes? If you betray me today, there will be nowhere left for you to hide. Liora gripped her phone until her hand ached. She looked out at the crowd of alphas waiting for them. The trap was set. I'm not the one you should be worried about, Kavi, Liora said. Liora scoffed in total disbelief. The wind whipped strands of hair across her face, but she didn't tuck them away gently. She brushed them back with a harsh, trembling hand. Her eyes narrowed into a sharp glare as she stared at Kavi. She couldn't believe the words that had just left his mouth. He was actually accusing her of leaking information to Carmel. You can't be serious, Liora hissed. Her voice was low, icy, and sharp enough to cut. How dare you? How dare you question my intentions when it comes to Joel? He is my son. Kavi didn't flinch. A flicker of surprise crossed his face for only a second before his own expression hardened. Our son, you mean, he corrected. Liora stepped toward him, closing the distance until they were only a few paces apart. Her heart hammered against her ribs, fueled by a rage she couldn't suppress. I was the one who wanted to keep him a secret. I wanted him safe and 1,000 miles away from the Elon family. I wanted him away from all of this madness. She gestured wildly at the opulent surroundings, the very cage Kavi had built for her. The only reason we are standing here is because of you, she continued, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You used him to tie me to you. You threatened his safety just to get me under your thumb. So don't you ever pretend you care about his well-being more than I do. Kavi's eyes darkened. He looked down at her clenched fists, then back up to her face. His knuckles turned white as he squeezed his hands into balls at his sides. Liora didn't care about his anger. Not today. Usually, she was better at this. She was the queen of keeping her cool, especially when Kavi tried to get under her skin. But today felt different. Every time she turned around, Joel was being ushered away for bonding time. She felt like a guest in her own son's life, and the resentment was boiling over. Do you even remember the deal? Liora asked, a bitter smile twisting her lips. I've kept my end. We've been together. If that's what you want, we can do it again right here. Is that what this is about? Kavi's eyebrows twitched. He remained silent, watching the way her chest rose and fell with every jagged breath. You swore to keep Joel away from Carmel, Liora reminded him, her voice firm. You are doing a terrible job. I can overlook almost anything, Kavi. But do not bring my son into your games. I became your tool so he wouldn't have to be. This starts and ends with me. She took a final step forward, her chin tilted up. If you ever put him in danger, Carmel will be the least of your problems. I will take Joel and disappear faster than you can blink. You won't find us. Your people won't find us. Do you understand? For a long moment, the only sound was the whistling wind. Kavi watched her fume, his gaze unreadable. Finally, he spoke. I'll handle it, Kavi said. His tone was solemn, devoid of the usual mockery. I will handle Carmel for even trying to interfere. As for you, Liora. He moved with a speed that caught her off guard. Before she could retreat, his hand snaked around her waist. He spun her around, pressing her back firmly against the cold metal railing of the balcony. "I want you so badly it's making me lose my mind," Kavi whispered into her ear. His breath was hot, contrasting with the chill of the air. "Where did all this fire come from? You're driving me crazy." Liora felt a traitorous surge of heat rush through her. She hated how easily he could flip the switch from a confrontation to something else entirely. She hated that even now, while she was furious with him, her body reacted to his touch. "We are outside," Liora managed to say, though her voice was shaky. "Anyone could walk out here." "Let them," Kavi muttered against her skin. He moved his hand down her spine, his touch lingering at the waist of her pants. Liora's breath hitched as he reached around, his fingers finding her skin. She felt a wave of dizziness as he pulled her closer, his body acting as a shield against the rest of the world. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since we were at the cabin," Kavi growled. He sounded hungry, almost desperate. "I'm done waiting." He guided her forward, forcing her to lean over the railing. Liora's hands gripped the cold steel for support. She felt the sudden shift in his movements, the rustle of clothing, and then the overwhelming heat of him against her. The contrast was sharp. The railing was freezing against her palms, but Kavi was a furnace at her back. When he moved, Liora let out a broken gasp, her eyes widening as she stared out at the dark horizon. "Kavi," she whimpered, her strength fading as her knees went weak. He gripped her waist tighter, holding her steady. His rhythm was relentless, a physical manifestation of the tension that had been building between them for weeks. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear one more time. "That's right," Kavi urged. "Tell me exactly what you want." Liora stepped out of the bathroom, the steam from the shower still clinging to her skin. An hour remained before the gala. She found Kavi sitting on the edge of the bed. He looked halfway like the alpha the world feared. His suit pants were on, and his white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He moved with slow, calculated precision as he strapped a vintage leather watch to his wrist. Liora pulled her bathrobe tighter. She could still smell him on her skin from earlier. The memory of their time together made her pulse skip, but the look on Kavi's face stopped her heart for a different reason. Her dress sat on the bed near him. He stared at the silk fabric as if he had never seen it before, even though he was the one who bought it. Kavi looked up. His eyes locked onto hers with a piercing intensity. He didn't speak. He just watched her, his gaze traveling over her face like he was solving a puzzle. Liora felt a familiar warmth stir in her stomach. His eyes always seemed to see right through her defenses. Then, the warmth died. Kavi's expression went flat. He looked away, his jaw tightening. Liora had spent enough time around him to know that shadow. Something was wrong. The air in the room felt heavy and cold. "Carmel's position in the company," Kavi said. He didn't look at her as he slid a thick manila folder across the duvet. "You are taking it." Liora froze. She didn't touch the folder. "What are you talking about?" "Before this night ends, Carmel will forfeit Elon Company," Kavi stated. He finally met her eyes again. His gaze was sharp enough to cut. "He will do it in front of the granddad and every alpha at the summit." Liora shook her head, a nervous laugh bubbling in her throat. "To me? Kavi, he won't just hand over his life's work. Especially not to me. He's too proud." Kavi's lips curled into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "He will." "Why?" Liora stepped closer, her suspicion growing. "Why would he ever do that?" Kavi leaned back, his eyes tracking her every move. "Because he owes you. We are going back to the lake house. 6 years ago." The oxygen left the room. Liora felt like she had been punched in the gut. Her secret was out. The one thing she thought was buried in the dirt of the past was sitting right between them on the bed. "Kavi," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't play the fool," Kavi said. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. "His first night with you. You think I don't know what happened? You think I don't know he couldn't keep his wolf under control?" Liora felt a chill crawl down her spine. The memory rushed back like a tidal wave. She remembered the full moon. She remembered the way the shadows moved in that old house. For shifters, the full moon was a test of will. To lose control was the ultimate sign of weakness. For an alpha, it was a death sentence for their reputation. Carmel had lost himself to the beast that night. He hadn't asked. He hadn't waited. He had simply taken. It wasn't love. It was a primal haze. Afterward, the shame had been so thick they both agreed to never speak of it again. How did you find out? Liora's voice was raw. Kavi didn't answer. He didn't have to. He had resources she couldn't even imagine. Liora backed away, her hands shaking. That was private, Kavi. You can't use that. It's not a tool for a business deal. It's a trauma. It is leverage, Kavi snapped. He stood up, his massive frame casting a long shadow over her. An alpha who loses his mind to his wolf is a liability. Shamed. Think about the whispers at the summit. They will find out he broke his bride because he was too weak to stay in control. He will be a laughingstock. Stop it, Liora hissed. Kavi didn't stop. He stalked toward her until she was backed against the wall. He reached out, his hand gripping her chin. He wasn't hurting her, but his grip was unyielding. He dared to question Joel's blood, Kavi spat, his eyes flashing with a dark, vengeful light. He ordered a DNA test. He tried to take my son from me. So, I will take everything from him. His pride. His company. His seat at the table. And I am going to use you to do it. Liora felt a tear prick her eye. This isn't about justice. This is just you being cruel. You're using me as a pawn to hurt him. Kavi leaned in, his face inches from hers. She could smell the faint scent of tobacco and expensive cologne. I don't use pawns, Liora. I use weapons. Tonight, you are the sharpest blade I have. He let go of her chin, but his presence still pinned her in place. You will be there, Kavi continued. His tone was cold and factual. You will wear that dress. You will smile. You will stand close enough to him that he remembers exactly what he did to you. And when I force him to sign that paper, you will keep your head high. Liora felt sick. This wasn't just Carmel's shame. It was hers. Kavi was dragging her darkest memory into the light just to win a war. Do you hate me that much? She asked. Kavi paused. For a split second, his mask slipped. His eyes softened, looking almost human, almost regretful. But the moment vanished before she could grab hold of it. No, Kavi said quietly. He turned toward the mirror to finish his tie. But I hate him. Liora looked at the folder on the bed. She looked at the man she had just shared a bed with. Then why does it feel like I'm the one getting executed? Don't look away, Kavi whispered. His breath brushed against Liora's ear, sending a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the Grand Hotel ballroom. She wanted to close her eyes. She wanted to be anywhere but under the glittering chandeliers of the Alpha Summit. Instead, she kept her head high, her fingers clutching her clutch bag until her knuckles turned white. The car ride had been a blur of silent tension. Every mile brought them closer to this moment, and every minute dragged Liora back to a memory she had tried to bury 6 years ago. She remembered Carmel's hands from that night. They hadn't been gentle or certain. They were frantic and desperate, the movements of a man losing a war with himself. He wasn't a monster that night, just a man terrified of his own shadow, the man who believed he was the weakest link in the Elon bloodline. Liora had promised to protect that secret. She had loved the broken man behind the mask of the perfect alpha. But as the elevator doors had opened to the sound of clinking glass and soft orchestral music, she realized that protection was a luxury she no longer possessed. Kavi stepped into the room like a predator entering a high-end gallery. His tailored suit fit his imposing frame perfectly, drawing every eye in the hall. Liora walked beside him, feeling like a prize on a leash, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "He's here," Kavi muttered, his gaze locking onto a figure in the center of the crowd. Carmel stood surrounded by a circle of lesser alphas and wealthy investors. To anyone else, he looked like the picture of absolute control. But Liora saw the truth. She saw the slight grit of his teeth and the way his fingers gripped his champagne flute just a fraction too hard. When Carmel's eyes met hers, a faint, sad smile touched his lips. Liora felt her stomach drop. She looked at Kavi, hoping for a shred of hesitation, but his face was a mask of cold stone. "Stay here," Kavi commanded, his voice a low rumble. He left her side, cutting through the crowd with a deliberate, lethal grace. Liora was immediately swarmed by a group of lunas, their voices a buzzing hive of fake pleasantries and sharp-edged gossip. She nodded and smiled where she thought it was appropriate, but her soul was 10 feet away, watching Kavi approach his brother. Kavi didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply stepped into Carmel's personal space and leaned in close. To the rest of the room, it looked like a private moment between brothers. To Liora, it looked like a public execution. She watched Carmel's face. The color drained from his cheeks as Kavi whispered into his ear. The mask didn't just crack, it shattered. Carmel's eyes flickered to Liora for a split second, a look of pure, raw shame, before he looked back at the floor. Kavi placed a hand on Carmel's shoulder, a gesture that appeared supportive but held the weight of a death sentence. Kavi nudged him toward the small stage at the front of the hall. Carmel moved like a man in a trance. He picked up a silver spoon and tapped it against his crystal glass. The sharp ting-ting-ting sliced through the room. The music died. The laughter faded. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the gathered dignitaries. The rumors had been flying for weeks. Everyone expected him to resign. They expected a scandal. But no one was ready for the specific brand of chaos Carmel was about to unleash. "As of this moment, I am stepping down as the CEO of Elon Company," Carmel announced. His voice was steady, but his eyes were vacant. A collective breath was held. "My ex-wife, Liora Elon, will assume my duties and take control of the firm." The silence that followed was so deep it felt like a physical weight. Liora felt the blood rush to her head. She scanned the room, looking for an escape or a savior. Grandfather Elon was nowhere to be seen. Melek and Shira were absent. There was no one to stop the dominoes from falling. She looked at Kavi. His eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. By calling her his ex-wife, instead of Kavi's wife, Carmel had thrown a final, defiant punch in front of the entire elite world. It was a petty victory, and Kavi was not the type of man to let a slight go unpunished. Kavi stepped forward, his eyes locked on Carmel. "Is that all you have to say, brother?" Kavi asked, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Liora, do you accept it?" The question hung in the air like a heavy fog. Carmel stood in the center of the ballroom, his face a mask of disbelief and hidden pain. Every Alpha and Luna in the Elon pack turned their heads at once. The silence was deafening. It felt like a physical weight pressing against Liora's chest. She felt the heat of 100 judging glares. They weren't looking at Carmel with pity. They were looking at her with pure disdain. To them, she was the reason for this public collapse. They whispered with their eyes, blaming her for whatever lapse in judgment had led the future Alpha to this moment. Carmel's eyes narrowed as he waited for her answer. His gaze wasn't soft or pleading. It was accusing. He looked at her like she was the one who had pulled the rug out from under him. Liora felt hollow inside. She knew exactly what he was thinking. If she said yes, she was admitting to the world that she had betrayed his darkest secrets to Kavi. If she said no, she would ruin Kavi's trap and face a wrath that terrified her even more. What is the meaning of this? The sharp voice of Grandfather Elon sliced through the tension. Liora let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She hoped the old man's presence would force the wolves to pull back their claws. But the hope died quickly. "Do you accept, Liora?" Carmel repeated. He didn't care about his grandfather. He only cared about her answer. Beside her, Kavi stepped closer. He didn't look stressed. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man watching a very entertaining movie. He leaned down, his lips brushing near her ear. "Tell him," Kavi whispered. His voice was full of dark amusement. Liora didn't have to look at him to know his eyes were dancing with triumph. To Kavi, this was a game. He was dismantling Carmel's life piece by piece, and he was using her as the wrecking ball. He didn't care if she was humiliated. He didn't care if the entire pack ended up hating her. Liora realized then that Kavi was blinded by his need for revenge. She was just a trophy Carmel wasn't supposed to have, and Kavi was happy to break that trophy if it meant hurting his rival. "Well?" Grandfather Elon urged. His stern eyes were fixed on her now. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Liora winced. The walls felt like they were closing in. "Don't mess this up, Liora," Kavi muttered under his breath. The threat in his tone sent a cold shiver down her spine. Her head began to spin. The lights of the ballroom blurred into streaks of gold and white. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She just needed to be away from the eyes, the whispers, and the suffocating pressure of the Elon men. Before her brain could talk her out of it, her feet started moving. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the gasps and the way people scrambled to get out of her way. She ran out of the hall and down the long, cold marble corridor. She didn't stop until the biting winter air hit her face. She found herself in the middle of the dark parking lot. She looked around wildly, but she couldn't even remember where they had parked. She was trapped. Even if she found the car, she didn't have the keys. She couldn't drive herself away from this nightmare. "Liora."